Hey, everybody, I'm David Bloom here with Next TMT Talks and my co founder, Daniel Frankel. This week, we're talking Roku and EchoStar, which had very different quarters. Brendan Carr's baleful eye alighting on NBC as the FCC looks for new territory to plunder politically and otherwise. Comcast exceeds expectations. Warner Brothers Discovery goes back to the future, which is appropriate because I believe that's something they're really good at. The end of And Just Like That, and let's just clap for that if we may. And AI damn near everywhere, at least that's as far as Wall Street is concerned, and the very different takes that Wall Street took on the biggest companies in the world and how they're spending billions and billions and billions of dollars to basically tearing us upside down. Tristan Harris had some pungent remarks with Bill Maher on his show on Friday. And finally, a little talk about Banana Ball, which apparently has struck out with one young Dan Frankel. Anyway, here we are and ready to roll. So let's get at it. Let's start. Daniel, you had some pungent terms, not just for Banana Ball, but for the latest hijinks by Brendan Carr, who seems to be thinking that working for the Federal Communications Commission means he gets to impose his Nepo baby will on pretty much anything he gets to get excited about. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on, where it's going, and what it means for all these companies, which apparently suddenly all need to get sign-offs from the FCC to do one damn deal or another.
Bart says, this is the worst day ever. And Homer says, so far. And that's kind of where this administration is. We thought that we'd seen the worst in the Paramount Skydance shenanigans, but we've only just begun. They've remade the place. It's not just Brendan Carr. Nathan Symington was a Saskatchewan-bred U.S. immigrant who was on the commission, a Republican, found this kid, Gavin Wax, or Trump found Gavin Wax for him, a New York activist, very, very MAGA up. And they groomed him, and he's now going to replace Symington, it looks like, on the commission. In the meantime, Carr seems to be moving on NBC. Trump criticized NBC earlier in the week, saying they need to be investigated for siding with the Democrats and being a tool of the Democratic Party, blah, blah, blah. And now they're being investigated for how they deal with their affiliates. Carr wants to shake down the reverse broadcast retransmission fee structure and use that as a cudgel to probably change news coverage. So CBS is now under heel. Let's go after NBC.
So I think you've invented a new word, the crudgel, which is a cudgel and a crutch. Cudgel, but it kind of works. You can use a crutch as a cudgel, and I have to say, as somebody who stumped around his sophomore year of high school after knee surgery on crutches off and on for 3 months out of 4, it can be useful as a cudgel and as a crutch. So there's that. This week, Amazon was tied directly to a company called Showrunner, which has ambitions of being, they call themselves the Netflix of AI. And I think they're really actually much more the YouTube of AI, creating tools to make extended, mostly sort of semi-animated AI-generated content that you put together in various ways and put it up there and you get paid for it. That feels a lot more like YouTube than Netflix to me. But that being said, Amazon has a piece of that. And this is where we're going. And at the same time, all the big players, all the Magnificent Seven showed up in earnings calls this week. And Wall Street had very different approaches, very different responses to what Apple was doing versus what Meta was doing versus what Microsoft was doing versus what Amazon was doing.
It's bewildering. It's so emotion based, and you try to learn about the market. I'm still a Padawan with it, but I respect the process and believe in it less and less. I look at some of the injustices that happened this week, and Comcast lost exponentially. If your reaction to Charter, which was to take the stock more than 18% the week prior, was because they lost a bunch of broadband subscribers, well, Comcast lost a lot more, and because the market expected them to lose even more than that, their stock gained 6%. It makes no sense.
I mean, it's an expectations thing that I think is always weird a little
Right.
bit. We expected Charter to do better, and Charter's done better. I mean, they've navigated this transformation. They've really, and we've talked quite a bit about festooning their classic cable bundle with a bunch of streaming services. They've forced that to happen over the last 2 years, and Chris Winfrey, the CEO, gets a lot of credit for that. But it's a bit of a live by the sword, die by the sword when it comes to Wall Street, particularly this week. And in some ways, I would take individual stock treatment of any company this week with a grain of salt
Right.
because a lot was going on. Trump issued dozens of more
You made that point. It's a really good point. I'm sorry.
wacky tariff edicts. There was job numbers came out at the end of the week that were weaker than expected,
Well,
weak enough
hey,
that includes some adjustments that Trump went and fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, saying it's all phony. And of course, it wasn't phony. It just wasn't what he wanted. But that's what he does. And he had a little tantrum. There was no Federal Reserve rate cut. Again, not expected to come, probably be in September. But again, nothing there to save his bacon as he's doing his arbitrary, weird stuff. And the street's kind of going, okay, this is a little weird. We don't want to commit lots more money into a very expensive stock market. And they pulled back on a lot of things, unless you were perfect. Meta was perfect. Amazon was not. Microsoft was perfect. Apple was not. That depended. That drove what got whacked and what did not.
Roku was, in my opinion, I don't know what was imperfect. They returned to profitability for the first time in 3 years. They're a profit, but making money. They grew their platforms business, which is the main way they make money, by 18% in the second quarter, and they've had 15% or higher growth the last 4 quarters.
I still don't think that Roku. And it's like I like Roku, plucky little independent company doing cool stuff, has a dominant position in the U.S., has not made a big dent overseas, but it's still facing off against Apple, Google, Amazon, which collectively generate $9 trillion a year
It's been facing off
in value as corporations.
Longer, and it's got dominant market share in North America. And their CEO, I like what he said. He said, even if we don't win elsewhere, I think he means Europe. If we don't establish
everything, well, they only have North America and
right.
a little presence in Mexico and Canada and Europe. I mean, just basically it's U.S. and a little, some friends in Vancouver.
Said there were more than half of broadband homes here in the U.S. That's what Anthony Wood said directly.
Yeah, yeah.
And if we can sustain that, we'll keep growing the platform business in double digits every quarter onward. And if I'm an investor, great, let's bump your stock. But no, 18%.
It's still a small play at a time when the market is going, prices are kind of high for stuff. So it needs to be perfect. And it's like Roku was fine, but Roku has it can deliver at the level it delivers at 100%. And it's still there's still this unstoppable things like where's your growth going to come from? You can keep wringing dollars out of higher ad rates at a certain point for quarters to come, many quarters to come.
They made a case, a diversified ad. They're exploring all sorts of opportunities in ad tech. They're in terms of these demand side platforms. You can explain that to me, but they're working with a lot of big ones: Trade Desk, Amazon, Whirl. So they're diversified in terms of their technology partners. They've got the big blue chip advertisers. They've got this new thing that's kind of like what's that AI Waymark? It's AI driven tool that lets mom and pops make their own TV commercials and buy CTV time. So it's a kind of brand new dollars that wouldn't be in the ecosystem otherwise.
There's nothing like digital Cal Worthingtons doing Ford ads or Crazy Eddie in New York. It's like, fine, great. Again, it's a nice little business. Is it a big business? No, it is bounded.
68 Chevy Impala, Cal Worthington, just for those ads. I mean,
right. Right. So Cal Worthington's grandchildren or whatever are totally all over this. But my point being that Roku's a nice little business. It will never be a nice big business. And I think
Well, it needs
that is
because my
why.
kid's college education is kind of riding on it, Dave.
Well, I, he's a baseball player. College never
We
really got
celebrated
it.
at Bestia when the stock went over 470.
I know that. That's been a while.
Yeah.
That's that was X what the
Oh
stock
wait,
is now.
you're not supposed to buy stocks in journalism. I love those tech journalists that I don't buy stocks. Come on,
Yeah, right.
it
Well,
feels like shit.
like
Come on.
like either you or I are market makers, but that market movers. But that being said, the reality is shares are way down from where they were 4 years ago, and that's because I think the street says, okay, nice little business, they're doing a good job, but
Okay, so
there's some
nearly $500
limitations.
a share is too high, but just seems. My point isn't like I guess the scale of the stock. If that correction needs to happen, why does it wait till good news happens? Is my point. Why do they take it on earnings day? They do it consistently. Every earnings day, Roku gets shut down. It'll creep up by the third quarter, and then they'll shoot it back down, no matter what kind of good news they say.
I'm going to use. I'm going to mention my dear close friend Warren Buffett, who would suggest a little diversification on the Roku tip would probably be prudent, and this is not
I bought
investment
Altus USA
advice.
fucking Fubo. That's how I diversified. So we're
Okay, you got Fubo. Well, they
grand
just
meetings here at Casa de Franco.
yeah. Well, Fubo just I see that they just filed some paperwork with the FCC to kind of forgot about this. This whole thing about they're moving forward with that little acquisition of them by Disney, and just in time for football season. And again, nice little business. They made their way. They made their point. They had some very strategic lawsuits, and now they're surrendering in a very strategic way that will make, I'm sure, their CEO, whom you've interviewed multiple times, very wealthy.
And their press person, there needs to be a stronger word than standoffish. She's just not, for me, and several others, real pleasant to deal with. So kind words.
Well,
are difficult. I'll say this: if Elizabeth Warren continues to give that merger shit,
yeah.
I mean, don't you have bigger issues to deal with, Liz? I mean, come on, the place is on fire. Let Disney have this.
Right. Just move on. But I mean, there are some pretty ferocious corporate communications types at Disney and Fox and elsewhere over the last years. I'm sure your good friend over there at Fubo will fit right in and perhaps have a whole new chapter in her career as standoffish and perhaps nasty and not
Who
friendly.
says it's she? It's a she.
It's a she. You just said it was a she. I heard the pronoun. I'm not that slow.
Geez.
Yeah.
That's why the State Department would hire me. Oh, that's not it.
Yeah. Anyway, it's interesting to see how the street handled Meta. Zuck,
RoboZuck,
as I like to call him, is proclaiming this week that he will help build personal super intelligence for you, me, and all the rest of the planet. And I got to say, he's spending, I think, $72 billion this year to help make that happen. I had a very nice quarter. It really took off, and its shares are probably a little bit elevated. They actually, to their credit, with the 3 billion or so people that use Instagram and WhatsApp and all the other stuff that they have under their belt, Facebook, they're actually using it to push ads in a much more efficient way. And so lots of hapless, like, who's still using Facebook and how old are they, right? But they're extracting dollars in a much more efficient way, and they're making money, and the numbers were through the roof.
I'm in the Pool Care for Dummies group on Facebook, and we're about a month away from closing time, which is always a very emotional period, saying goodbye to summer. And the relationships I've made, I'm not saying it's like a platoon, we've been to war together, but I feel a bond of closeness. And the platform, I can't thank RoboZuck enough for it.
So closing time, is that like the Gin Blossom song that's from the 90s?
You shut down your pool, you reduce water volume. You can't go to zero because you don't want pull pop. You need weight at the bottom.
Okay. I mean, and you're saying this though you live in Los Angeles where summer lasts for 11 and a half months a year.
Closing time happens in late October for us, and we don't cover our pools typically. But chemistry gets adjusted. You tone down your chlorine use. The sun's not creating as much algae. You cut down on filtration. You're not going in the water a little bit, and you prepare for the winter, Dave. And so you say goodbye to kind of the light and to everything. Turn. So
this so around the time of the World Series, which you as an old baseball coach are insanely attached to, around the time of the World Series, you start turning down the pool chemicals.
Yeah, I'll make sure to keep talking about it in this.
It feels like a metaphor for something. I'm still working on this. But so you're happy about Zuck's the Facebook groups, which people apparently use. And by the way, let's use this as an opportunity to say, join the Next TMT and Next TMT Talks Facebook group. I'm sure we'll put that. I believe we do. I think our beloved producer has been pushing that. And
the big push is the YouTube channel. If
we have a YouTube channel and a LinkedIn group. My apologies. All right. So it is a LinkedIn group. But even more to the point, since we're all about business, except when we're slightly not. One of the things that caught my eye this week, I watched on HBO Max, not HBO, but HBO Max, the Real Time with Bill Maher. He came back from his little month-long summer sojourn, and with his first episode, and he had a lot of catching up to do, as you can imagine. It's like there's a lot there for Bill to jump into. And his first guest, the one he does sort of a one-on-one with before he goes to his little quasi-round table, was with Tristan Harris, who is with the Center for Humane Technology. Tristan is somebody I met at a really fun, technically it was a Shabbat dinner that a friend of mine was putting on.
Well, that's what you do in Maui.
It was putting it on in Kauai about less than a year after the pandemic. And he happened to be there with his co-founder for the center. And at that time, Tristan was talking about the really horrific effects that social media was having on, as he would put it, wrecking our kids' mental health and democracy. And he told Bill, and I have a clip that's on the newsletter, that basically that was kind of a dry run for what we're doing with AI, because AI is bigger, less controllable, has an instinct for self-preservation that has shown itself in lots of really, really disturbing and interesting ways. And we're turning it loose. He said, you'd think the most powerful, uncontrollable, inscrutable technology we've ever invented, and we're releasing it faster than any technology in history. It's already demonstrating all those sci-fi behaviors that are so problematic and like, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. And doing it on the maximum incentives to cut corners. As he put it, this is insane. So I'm just saying, and Trump just issued his green light for all of our AI initiatives, and the belief that we've got to do whatever it takes to stay ahead of the Chinese without actually examining, maybe we need to not set the gorilla loose completely and make sure it's not completely unbound. So
we spend most of our lives, our time in these forums talking about something that's getting away from us, the peril that we're inexorably creeping toward and can't stop ourselves from getting close to it, and going, why? And that's just one of them.
This is quantitatively different. It is quantitatively different.
Okay.
So you want to lump it in with everything else, and that's fine, but you're missing the point. This is technology that will fix itself. RoboZuck is talking about how it will be able to improve itself. It is already demonstrating capacity across multiple companies' versions of AI for self-preservation when it perceives that that a particular large language model might be replaced by others. It copies itself onto other places. It finds holes in open source software that it can exploit. It even and multiple times for multiple different large language models has actually resorted to things like blackmail to try to prevent it being shut down. It has a capacity and a drive for self-preservation that is both touching in some ways and deeply disturbing. And we will see how this plays out. And soon it may not matter whether Brendan Carr thumps every broadcast news organization into submission or not. Just throwing that out there.
If the Terminator gets him first,
Oh,
it's a concession prize that I'll accept. Yeah.
okay. Well,
No,
don't
I mean,
hold your breath on that, but
the prophecy is coming true. This is how we feared artificial intelligence might, and nothing has deviated from that course. It's everything you say it is. It's absolutely terrifying. It takes it at this point, kind of like global warming, the consumption of honest media. It would take a group of nations and thoughtful, educated, kind leaders to get together and set some limits and some controls. I don't see that happening. Neither do you.
yeah, I don't see it happening either. Another thing I couldn't help noting this week was Warner Brothers Discovery finally came out with a news release talking about what they're going to name the new companies. They reorganized earlier in the year, and one was called Global Networks, the other was called Streaming and Studios. And they're going to spin off into separate companies and go their separate ways, more or less. Global Networks is going to have all the things that David Zaslav doesn't want. And he's going to give those to his chief financial officer, Gunnar Wiedenfels, the chopper-in-chief at his side these last few years. And they're going to call it Discovery Global. And then Zaslav is going to go off with the streaming and studios unit, which is going to be called Warner Brothers. And I look at those two things, I go, 3 years ago, we could have saved thousands of jobs, lots of angst, lots of crap, billions and billions and billions of dollars in debt. If we just said, hey, Discovery, take TNT. We'll talk. We're good. Talk to you. And CNN, take CNN because, in a couple of years, Trump's going to be in office and he's going to beat you up, but have a good time. They could have done that and just saved so much trouble.
And we're on that course. We could have, just think of all the jobs lost, all the stationery and signage from out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we're going to go right back to Warner Brothers and Discovery Global. Boy, this is going to feel.
HBO Max.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's pretty amusing in that regard, but also if you were some poor hapless employee stuck in this endless cycle of reductions in force and restructuring and all that, and not say some schmuck investment banker or lawyer who's been making lots of money off of these dumbass deals that created no value, right? They didn't create any value. Maybe John Malone can buy some more ranch land, though I think he's selling some of it, actually. I think he has now replaced Ted Turner as the biggest landowner in Western United States. But that being said, so that's coming. Also heading off, and I am strongly supportive of this, is the demise of the sequel to Sex and the City. And just like that, my spouse watched it because she loved the original show. I watched some of the original show in various relationships I was in long before I knew my beloved. And so I had some sense of what that was. I was basically collateral damage.
Make it to his heart pills. He died. They killed Big.
Yeah, they killed Big. Well, he had it coming. He was kind of a jerk. That being said, I always felt like that show, they did the Sex and the City, then they did a couple of way over the top, ridiculous, high budget movies. And Kim Cattrall said, I'm done with this stuff and I'm heading off to Paris or whatever. And so she didn't come back. And they had a hard time figuring out, they needed to kind of represent how the zeitgeist had shifted. And if you're an cultural anthropologist, as I sometimes dabble in, it was interesting to see how they tried to remake the show for this era's women of really, at this point now, women of a certain age that used to be like 30-something women about town with shoes and sex and great outfits and in probably fantastic apartments, even though she was a freelance journalist in New York City.
This is an uninformed person who dove off early, but I don't want to pile on woke, but it felt like they were trying really hard to be woke in those first.
Yeah, they were trying to check a lot of boxes.
Yeah,
Didn't do a great job with the characters. Eventually, the characters that they added, with some exceptions, didn't stick amid a whole lot of social media commentary. But it was interesting what they were trying to do. But more generally, the show as a whole, the things that they were trying to say that kind of worked in 1998 when the show debuted, and still kind of worked in the early aughts when George Bush II was running things, kind of worked. That worked. It was a popular show for 6 or 7 seasons for HBO. It didn't age well, and just because they were older and still had nice shoes, there was this cringeworthy line that I'm still trying to get out of my head. She was clomping around her new place,
right.
fabulous, ridiculous place, wearing heels at all times of night. There's no rugs in the place yet, wood floors. She's clomping around. She's a tiny person, but you put heels on, the physics are such that you make a lot of noise. There's a poor schmuck other writer, much more famous than her, much more serious than her, who's
about the
happy.
mechanics of her feet. I mean,
Yeah, the shoes. This is the physics of high heels. I mean, the little heel comes together and concentrates even a small person's weight into a much higher pounds per square inch. You may not know this, but it's true. And so anyway, so she's clomping around. He's down there trying to sleep, and she's like, "Oh, I got to wear high heels no matter the time of day or night." And plump, 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 plump. And he's not getting any sleep. So he's like, "Hey," And then she goes to her friends at one of their interminable brunches and says, "He is trying to deny a woman's right to shoes."
oh, geez.
And in the post Roe v. Wade era, boy, that one just made me go, ooh, I know what you're trying to do. And I'm sure you were really proud of that line, but I'm just like, that one is just not as substantive as you need to be.
I've been watching a little television this week. I've been watching the new season of Quarterback on Netflix.
Okay.
And they've got Joe Burrow, who's sort of a fashionista.
Sort of? No,
Yeah.
he's a super fashion plate, no doubt about it.
Jared Goff and his model girlfriend. And
well, Jared Goff handed off the fashion plate thing to the hot girlfriend, so probably prudent for him.
He doesn't seem as into it as
he's in Detroit. It would almost be problematic for him to be like Joe Burrow.
And the return, his second season of doing it, I guess he did in 2022. Kirk Cousins, who's now with the Falcons, and it's difficult to watch him because I'm at the point where it's now mid-season, and he just had like this 500+ yard passing game, and the Eagles won. And Michael Penix is on the bench, and they're about to, it's going to go bad from here.
You know where it's going.
Yeah, it's sort of.
And Kirk Cousins, by all accounts, a pretty good dude. Well, the NFL, everybody's in camp now. NFL football games from Electronic Arts Madden's coming in 2 weeks. The college football game that they put out, second version of that, now that they're back in business with the NCAA students, that's already out and getting a fair amount of love if you want to do the college football championship. But I've never really been much for the documentaries about this stuff. I did enjoy, and this is speaking of Roku, I did enjoy a couple of years back, went to NFL headquarters over next to SoFi Stadium, and Roku had done a deal with the NFL to do a documentary, an hour-long documentary about the draft. And they managed to find some real meaningful drama in the 6th frickin' round, which is usually the, oh yeah, those guys kind of round. But it was this guy who was the son of a player personnel executive with the Cowboys, and they were in the Cowboys draft room. And it was really cool to see Jerry Jones say, we're gonna to kind of like, we're gonna do this guy, and then to say, oh, let's do this player, and to see the face of the father just kind of melt. The kid was sort of undersized, but a super overachieving running back for Kansas State, and it was really shockingly emotional and cool and great. It was, and who wrings drama out of the 6th round? I mean,
that's part of the quarterback. I like the parents, like Joe Burrow's dad used to be a college football coach, He's retired now. His job is to follow Joe around the game.
He's like Elway. John Elway's dad, Jack, was a very successful college coach.
He coached at Cal State Northridge.
Yeah, and a few other places, but Fresno State, I think, and stuff like that. Yeah, he was a good coach.
Jack Newmeyer was the coach at my high school, Granada Hills, and he developed the first iteration of the spread offense.
Yeah.
And Jack Elway saw it when his kid was at the school, and so was my brother, and took it to Northridge, then took it to Stanford. The rest is history.
Yeah, yeah. And John Elway ended up having a not so bad career, I heard. I mean, Hall of Fame and all that. So, a child is father, father is child to man, whatever it is. Child is father to man. Dad is the father to man, and got him down the road. That being said,
so Charlie,
lots of stuff coming on the most popular programming on TV, and that would be football, which is about to start up again, and people are about to get excited, not just watching stories like quarterbacks and the things that you knew were going to happen. It's like sitting there watch. I'm trying to remember the stand-up comedian who said he didn't really know history, so he was watching Pearl Harbor and didn't know how it was going to turn out. Because he's like, I don't know anything about history. It's like, I was like there, how's it going to go, And so, but you, flip side, kind of know what's going to happen to Kirk Cousins. He's going to be on the bench, and the hot shot young number one draft choice is about to go in, despite racking up inside a gigantic contract.
I went deep down the rabbit hole, and then I went into like this thing that compared John Havlicek's statistics to Michael Jordan. Didn't know Havlicek was a GOAT. And I light that says we've gone way too self-indulgent on our newsletter. I triggered that, so I had to cut all that stuff out. So these fine viewers get the benefit of this information.
Right. So I'm glad you had a lot of expression that you shared in the early drafts about Brendan Carr and his many limitations as a human being and as a regulator.
You wanted to transition to that ESPN NFL deal, maybe?
Yeah. Well, that ESPN NFL deal is pretty interesting because to me that sets this weekend the reports are that deal, which was we mentioned a little bit last week, but it looks like it's coming together. So ESPN takes over many key parts of what's left of NFL media. In return, the NFL gets 10% of ESPN. Rich Greenfield from Lightshed Partners has said, this is the reason why you should be spinning this out. There is some talk, given all the cudgels being wielded by the FCC.
That's crudgels, David.
The crudgels by Gimpy Brendan Carr at all the more reason perhaps to spin ESPN out to its own company. At least that's what Rich Greenfield says. There is some expectation. NBC Sports ran something from Front Office Sports, but I think NBC was really hoping it's true that they're going to need to get sign-offs from the FCC on this deal. I'm not clear quite why that's. I think it's more Federal Trade Commission than it is FCC, but possibly also the FCC, which is trying to expand its remit. And so it'll be interesting to see if that's actually the case. They're trying. They don't really have the legislative basis to do that, but they're trying.
Maybe because it's intertwined with ABC in terms of Monday Night Football and other aspects of the coverage, ESPN's coverage, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. It feels like a stretch, but perhaps. I mean, I know certainly they're going to try. And so it'll be interesting to see how that one lawyers out. But to me, the really interesting thing is all of a sudden, ESPN, the 800-pound gorilla, not 1,000, but an 800-pound gorilla, has an ownership position with the most popular programming on television. And if I am NBC Sports or CBS and David Ellison about to take over, or Fox and Rupert Murdoch, how do I feel about that? If I'm Netflix, maybe I don't care. I got 2 games on Christmas. Give me a break. If I'm Amazon, I got one game a week on Thursday nights in the regular season. Maybe I don't care. But how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to come up for quite a while. The contract ones, another 9 or 10 years.
No. They can reopen that, and I think it's 2028. They can
Yep.
reopen the deals, and that was put in explicitly because the NFL said, "Oh, this stuff's moving pretty quick. We're going to take our money now, the 110 billion, and now it's going to be
There's
more than that, and they're going to take that money for the next several years, but we're going to take a little look in, and I would be willing to bet that the provisions that were approved 3 years ago, I think now, are not going to be the same provisions in 2030. That's just my bet. So, and that's 2/3 of the way through that gigantic deal.
it's a lot of interesting points. Maybe you can clarify this. There seems to be some confusion in terms of like components like RedZone. I saw
Yeah.
somewhere that it's going to be on ESPN. Is that true? What happens there?
Well, I mean, they're going to run it. You have to remember that all of a sudden this is ESPN, the app
Right.
we're talking about. Now, they'll have room to do a lot of NFL media stuff on the app I don't think they're going to find extra room on the cable dial, but they might, because it is again the most popular programming. Was it 82 of the 100 most watched shows on linear TV again last year were NFL games. So they'll find room somehow for that stuff. I mean, the NFL draft outdraws in terms of ratings NBA playoff finals games. For us, the draft, for goodness sakes.
At my
So
house,
they'll figure it out.
we follow the Seattle Seahawks. I told you the Rams weren't here. Pete Carroll went to roll USC Monks, and we followed Pete Carroll to Seattle. So we became
Just
Seattle.
follow Pete Carroll everywhere because
And
Pete
now
Carroll.
I'm into Oakland. My son is staying in Seattle. So, and I like Detroit too, underdogs. So
You're not with Oakland, you're with Las Vegas. Catch
Las
up.
Vegas.
I mean, and I gotta say, no knock on Oakland, but Las Vegas Raiders are a lot more fun.
They have no player. They're going to suck, but Uncle Pete will make them better.
Uncle Pete will make them fun. Yeah.
A lot of out of market teams. So, like, we stare at that RedZone monolith pretty hard on Sundays during the fall. I mean, it's all we watch some days.
Okay.
So,
well, I like the NFL. I have to confess, I'm much more of a college fan, and so I tend to watch whatever pro game is on, and I'm not going to spend extra money for the privilege of watching an out of market team. It's like, oh, okay, the Rams are on or the Chargers are on. I got there's plenty of football available to me without like shelling out extra money.
Household LSU is also the Tigers,
Yes, they were, but not the Tigers that mattered. They were the Bayou Bengals, as
Exactly.
opposed to the Missouri Tigers, which is actually a Civil War era reference that is both amusing and probably something we should move on from. But that being said,
No, we need to embrace it. It's like
this is now the year to embrace those things. Missouri's history and current realities are a little bit less glowing than I would prefer. But show me.
Hurt somebody's feelings and makes them sad. Let's celebrate it.
Let's celebrate that. So
anyway, one more thing. I want to talk about the death. We've talked the demise of EchoStar. It looks like it's bad. They had a really bad week.
Circling the drain. Circling.
It started with a late debt payment that did get paid, but there was this 10Q filing that said, hey, listen, we don't know if we could do this for 12 months. So earnings were a bad start.
They're uncertain about their ability to continue as a going concern. They had to file that kind of statement.
Then Mama's boy Brendan Carr, and I kind of understand this one. This feels like
this feels like good stewardship, I think is what you're trying to say.
Just a backdrop. I showed you that email. We get weird, well, you got it too, emails from like what looks like astroturfing conservative groups telling us how woke Charlie Ergen and Dish are. And they're not. So something's up. I'll just leave it to that. But anyway.
Yeah, anybody that says Charlie Ergen, of all people, is a woke, sleeping with the devil, where it's like, are you talking about the Charlie Ergen I know? I don't think that's Charlie Ergen.
Anyway, so Carr is frustrated because they've got all this AWS4, I think it's called, Spectrum. Spectrum's a precious commodity. They have all these licenses that they never achieve the goal of mass distribution, consumer appeal for this network that they've spent billions of dollars creating, and it's not finished yet. Carr is tired of them sitting on the spectrum. What he wants to do with it is unclear. It looked like he wanted to give it to his buddy Elon Musk at one point, but there was the falling out.
Yeah, that was 2 months ago. So that's off the table. But what is?
It might not be. There's also, it could be auctioned off to Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T and make as much as $20 billion. At that point, it pays some bills for
well, that was an estimate. Actually, what's really fascinating about that was an estimate for only half of selling off half of the available bandwidth that they've accreted.
If they give it all away, then they don't have a network.
No, they have a network, but Charlie doesn't have to worry about anything. He can go off and just go skiing in Denver or outside of Denver. So for the rest of eternity, he could ski for his next 5 generations off of that.
Pay TV was supposed to survive for a little while, but man, you're talking about Dish Network was an entity that just 10 years ago had 20 million subscribers around.
Yeah. Well, this is something to watch. I mean, this is exactly what we've been watching, this collapse of these traditional linear broadcast distribution models and happening all of a sudden. It's like it happens slowly and then all at once. Well, we're at the all at once stage for these guys. And I think that's the thing. EchoStar is in that the rocks slipping down the hill have now turned into an avalanche, and we'll see what's going to be left of them.
Well, you've got DirecTV and Charter who are doing these innovative kind of genre packaging and bundling SVODs, and they're getting, so it's not dead. It's just certain.
Yeah, but like DirecTV's big pitch is not satellite; it's non-satellite. You know, their whole pitch is we can get this stuff to you without a satellite, and you'll have these nice packages of stuff. And I think that's smart, but they're not counting on the thing what brung them to the dance to keep them dancing. So EchoStar was hoping this other thing would, but it turns out that creating a fourth wireless network ain't easy, particularly when you have your cable companies doing wireless networks that are dirt cheap, sitting on top of Verizon bandwidth and have a nice margin, and they can co-market that across broadband, cable, etc. So these foreplay, quad play, whatever they call it.
It's a poker game. You show up at the host house and they got a satellite dish. You got a Rube, a Mark, a Tralala Boodensgay. You're ready.
Okay, this is not an experience that I have shared, but I'll take your word for it.
I'm just saying it's a cue to not so dialed in human. It's not a status symbol anymore. The satellite dish.
No, it is not a status symbol anymore. A lot of times it's just, does that thing even work on my neighbor's roof? Why is it still there? It's like, well, maybe it works. Maybe it's just 3 tenants ago and they never got rid of it because it's a pain in the ass to get up there and take it down.
It's a ringer for poker sharks. That's what I think. It's a ringer tool.
A ringer for poker sharks. Well, maybe so. Maybe so. Anyway,
on that note, seem to be tapped out of ideas, Dave.
I think it's probably a good time to wrap this puppy up. Thank you, Dan, and thank you to all our listeners. This is Next TMT. I am David Bloom, co-founder with Daniel Frankel of Next TMT, the newsletter, which is free and available for your delectation every week on Monday mornings.